And after getting some much-needed sleep, I'm back. I found my little limitations there. Turns out I can only stay up so long after only getting 3 hours of sleep. And so I do have a human limitation, a lot like Jessica in this newest episode when she, well, there are spoilers from this point on, so just kind of be careful of that. She gets shot, and she's fine, but it hurts like a bitch, and she's bleeding, and she has a moment of real vulnerability as she kind of sees her physical limitations in this grand game that's being played between her, Kilgrave, and others. Like, the story is really getting bigger, and the world is even getting bigger, and what they're exploring now is kind of the aftermath of the events of the first Avengers movie. And, well, now, I think it's the first one. I'm pretty sure it's the first one. Nothing that they've said so far feels like it could be a reference to Age of Ultron, Avengers 2, especially because we're still in New York and we're talking about buildings falling down and stuff, so I think we're still focusing on Avengers 1. And there's a very interesting scene in which Jessica gets mistaken as one of the Avengers, and she has a bit of a breakdown afterwards. I mean, it's not just because she was confused for an Avenger, but it's because the fact that she's been stalked by so many of Kilgrave's victims, the people that are being mentally manipulated into doing things that they don't want to do, and she's paranoid and looking over her shoulder for most of the episode. Anyone that's even vaguely looking in her direction or pointing a camera in her general direction, she assumes is working for Kilgrave and goes after them. Which gets worse when she gets these messages from Kilgrave that are just haunting, and the people that are giving them are, they just, I don't mean to be so hyperbolous or hyperbole filled when I'm talking about certain aspects of the show, but it's so good. It just gets me on that emotional level. And while I'm trying to be intellectual and about these little reviews here, the fact that I'm doing these pretty much right after I watch an episode and they're unscripted, it's kind of hard sometimes because this show is really good and I'm loving the hell out of it. And sometimes while I'm sitting here doing this, I just want to get through it so I can start watching the next episode. I really want to get to episode 5 here, but this episode really digs in to that paranoia feeling that I also kind of got from It Follows earlier this year, which is one of my favorite movies of the year so far. So it's really cool to see these I mean, it's not cool to see a woman who's been psychologically battered, but it's very interesting to see, a story about a character who's gone through that kind of thing, because obviously there are women in the world that have gone through those kinds of things, and it's very nice to see these kind of dark, twisted themes being tackled by Marvel and Disney and ABC of all things. Like, I can't help but just respect them for that. And then a couple of little things I noticed here. As I've said before, the cinematography on the show is really good. There's a lot of really interesting shots that sometimes seem to have a deeper meaning to them. Like, one scene ended that had Jessica, a couple episodes ago, kind of off kilter, not really being herself, and the next scene's opening shot is of something that should be it's a fence, but it's off kilter. It's a little warped. It's been damaged by something, and I could be overthinking it, but I think that there's some symbolism in there, and I found a couple of little. So there were shots in episode 4 that made me wonder if there were deeper meaning to them too. So I did a little research, and there's one shot that starts off with Jessica on a street in New York, the Town Hall Way, and that made me go, there's no way that that's a real street. But it turns out it might be a real street, and the Town Hall is a reference to some, I think it was a headquarters for the suffrage movement here in New York around 1921, I think it was. And if you don't know what the suffrage movement was, here, watch this video. There'll be a link around here somewhere that I just did on the movie Suffragette that you probably didn't see because nobody in America saw that. If you're in England, you probably saw it, and kudos to you because that's a great movie. But then later on in the episode, I noticed that Jessica's friend Trish, the one that's the radio talk show host who also knows jujitsu or Krav Maga and is kind of a badass, lives in apartment 1904. And so I Googled 1904 and the suffrage movement just to see if anything popped up after seeing that Town Hall Way thing. And it turns out 1904 was the founding of the organization that would become one of the bigger aspects of the suffrage movement. So there's some cool little hidden tidbits in this show too. I could also be overthinking those. Maybe that's just two wild coincidences that this show that's really very empowering for the modern, woman and all that kind of good stuff has all these little things that just coincidentally tie into the suffrage movement. Who knows? I don't know. I'm enjoying this show. I want to watch episode 5, so I'll see you guys in an hour-ish.